horror stories.
It's awesome. So let's bring
it. It really is, isn't it? Do you know when I was first introduced to this? Was watching Tales from the Crypt, the 1974 Amicus portmanteau horror collection of stories.
Yes.
And there's one in that called Wish You Were Here, where somebody, well, they basically do the monkey's paw, but there's that much intertextuality with it that they're just sort of like saying, oh, this is just like the monkey's paw in that story, the monkey's paw. Here's a monkey's paw. But yeah, it was just lovely. Yeah,
it was. It's a wonderful thing. I'm going to say hello, welcome. This story this week is so good. We've already started talking about it. That's before you even came in, before I hit the record button, we were already talking about this. This is great. We'll come back onto. Oh, I did get a telling off last week.
All right. Was it the facial hair?
No, wasn't the facial hair. That's though it's getting to the point where it might become a telling off. No, 13-year-old son who told us to do the smash like thingy. Yeah,
the like button. Yes, please.
Apparently we put it on the wrong end. Apparently you're supposed to do it now at the beginning and go smash that likes, peeps and guys.
And please hit the bell if you want notifying when we've got a new one of these out, because hitting the bell is also quite useful. Apparently, yes.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, there are bells, there are likes, there are.
Yes,
this is completely different. When we were growing up, if somebody sort of like said, "Oh, and you'd be able to look into this computer screen and say hit that like or smash that bell," we would have thought they're off their tits on something.
Absolutely. To me, a subscription used to be holding my comic at the newsagents for a week.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. So. Yeah, Captain Britain comics.
I was 2000 AD. 2000 AD every week. 2000 AD, swap shop and a bag of cola cubes. That was my Saturday mornings.
Oh, bless. Yeah, I think we've both dated ourselves so much there. Yeah.
Well, we're going to do it because I'm going to say, right, Ash, you picked the story this week. So can you please tell us what it was, what it's about? Go.
Right, yes. So the story that we were looking at this week was The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs. W.W. Jacobs had got a brother called W.W. Webb, but we're not talking about him. We're talking about W.W. Jacobs. Short story involves Mr. and Mrs. White and their adult son, Herbert. Sergeant Major Morris is a friend who served in the British Army in India, comes for dinner and introduces them to a mummified monkey's paw. An old fucker had placed a spell on the paw. I know it says fakir here, but we know what they mean. So that it could grant 3 wishes, but only with hellish consequences as a punishment for tampering with fate. Morris, having had a horrible experience using the paw, throws it into the fire. Mr. White, not believing Morris, retrieves it. Before leaving, Morris warns Mr. White of what might happen should he use the paw. So, spoiler alert, Mr. White hesitates at first, believing he already has everything he wants, which is probably one of the stupidest things a character in fiction has ever said. And then Herbert's suggestion, Mr. White flippantly wishes for £200, which will enable him to make the final mortgage payment for his house. When he makes his wish, Mr. White suddenly drops the paw in surprise, claiming that it moved and twisted like a snake. The next day, Herbert leaves for work at a local factory. That night, an employee arrives at the Whites' home, telling them that Herbert has been killed in a terrible machine accident that mutilated his body. The company denies any responsibility for the incident, but makes a goodwill payment to the family of the deceased, and the payment's £200, the exact amount Mr. White had wished for. A week after the funeral, Mrs. White, mad with grief, insists that her husband use the paw to wish Herbert back to life. Reluctantly, he does so despite great unease at the thought of summoning his son's mutilated and decomposing body. An hour or so later, the cemetery being 2 miles away, there's a knock at the door, and as Mrs. White fumbles at the locks in a desperate attempt to open the door, Mr. White becomes terrified and fears the thing outside is not the son he loved. Makes his 3rd wish, the knocking stops suddenly, and Mrs. White opens the door to find no one is there. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's become its own trope, really, in horror stories, hasn't it?
it's very, very interesting going back and reading this, because I read it twice this week. I read it once as the actual text, and then I listened to my favorite I always seem to go to. It's Christopher Lee doing the Fireside Stories on this time, which was a series for the BBC that was done on Radio 2. Interestingly, it's abridged on the radio one, and so it's quite interesting hearing what they cut out. So that was quite cool. But yeah, it's got so much atmosphere and so much of its time in the way that the language uses, in the actual style of the writing. But the end of it really does start building the tension. It's wonderful for that. And yeah, really, really enjoyed it. I've got so many points that I want to discuss about this tonight. One where it's been used in modern, the tropes have been used in modern fiction. Looking at the meta that's used in it. It's got so much about it. It's such a modern idea of story when you look at modern fiction.
Let's start with that. Where has it been used in modern fiction that you've seen? I mean, yeah.
God, where hasn't it? It was used in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's been used in The Simpsons.
Yes.
You basically can say that the entire Wishmaster series comes off the back of it. Because it's, as far as I can see, it's the first time that it was used as a wish gone bad idea. Prior to that, it's kind of like semantic wishes go bad. So you get that kind of bedazzled thing, where you got Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, where he wishes for something and he doesn't quite get what he gets exactly what he wants for the wording, rather than a payback. Rather than you've got to, there's always a payment that needs to be made somewhere along the line. Where the Monkey's Paw is pretty much the first one that did the payment. There's a trade-off. You want something, you're going to have something taken away, which is Wonder Woman 1984. The whole story of Wonder Woman 1984 is based on the same concept of they have a stone that it does it with, but for every wish you make, something gets taken away from you. So it's a very similar sort of like conceit.
I've not got to the end of Wonder Woman 1984 yet. I've got it downloaded and I've tried watching it a few times, but I've just run out of tissues. Because it's so sad. Because
it's terribly sad.
Yeah. It's, I mean, within the stories, there's the intertextuality where they're talking back to 1001 Arabian Nights and suggesting that it's like Aladdin's lamp. But yeah, with Aladdin's lamp, there weren't any specific payoffs there, were there? With Aladdin's lamp, he got pretty much what he asked for. I want to look pretty impressive in front of Princess Jasmine, or whatever she was called before Disney got hold of her.
That's more a tale about keeping your word, isn't it? That the genie of the lamp. It's more about, yes, you get everything that you want, and it won't pay off the same way, because that's not what everybody's really after. So it's more along those sort of lines, rather than you've got to pay the piper.
I mean, one of the things that I love about this story that really, really excites me is we're scared of absolutely nothing. There's no monster that actually comes and bites us at the end of it. There's no woo or anything like that. There's just somebody knocking at the door, and it could just have been a passing drunk that was knocking at the door. I mean, I know it's not meant to be a passing drunk that was knocking at the door, but there's somebody knocking at the door, and it's just that idea of, do you know what? That could be the worst thing possible. It's the not knowing, isn't it? Yeah, it's the not knowing, and the fact that he's got away without scaring us with a monster, which I think is really, really clever.
And it has such a great impact as well. And so much so that when they used it in Buffy, which was again, spoilers, it's been over 20 years. But when
Joyce was coming back.
When Joyce is coming back, when Buffy's mum is coming back. And they do the same trick at the end where Buffy opens the door and there's nobody there. And there is that moment of calmness in that emptiness that happens. That is chilling and seriously sinister. And it's just a weird, it's a bit like the dog barking at the door, and you open the door up and there's nothing there. It's just, what was he barking at? Rather than just being a little
Bijan.
rag.
Yeah.
Just being a Bijan looking for
Yeah.
attention. It's just, but it does. You get those moments, and there's certain times of night I think happens as well. I think there's a really brilliant part in that description at the end of the Monkey's Paw when he talks about the street lamp flickering, because it creates that artificial feeling of the street. Because I think, you know, under street lights, even under gas lights, or, you know, where the lights that we have, especially if it's been raining slightly as well, sometimes it can feel like you're walking in a studio. It doesn't feel like the open air. It has a real close sort of like I can't remember what it is when you're scared of confined spaces. Claustrophobic. It's a very claustrophobic feel in an open space at night sometimes with the lights, the way that they create an artificial ceiling. And I thought that played it beautifully. I thought it was just such a wonderful image at the end of it.
Say this story's over 100 years old. Yeah, it's just really stood the test of time. But it's been made into plays. It's been made into, as you say, there's loads of television series that have picked up and run with it. And I suppose it's just that idea of, again, it's a wonderfully capitalist idea that you have to work for whatever it is that you want. If you actually wish for something and get that given to you, you're going to pay even more for it.
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, we're being reminded that we should all be good little worker drones, and we should earn things honestly rather than dishonestly.
No such thing as a free lunch.
No, there isn't.
Yeah.
Is it a bit racist?
What, the actual
story?
It's a very interesting one, actually, because I think it's very colonialist.
Yeah.
I think from a post-colonial point of view, you know, the story itself, but easily updates, you know, because it's of its time. I was quite interested in the Sergeant Major actually coming to the house and telling his stories as if that's their entertainment. There was no TV. So they used to basically pay people to come round and tell them stories of their lives. Because it wasn't like an old family friend.
I do that with tramps that I find on the promenade, though. It's just like, yeah, come round to the house. No, I don't.
Yeah, but you pay them to come around and tell them how wonderful you are. Well, just stand there and tell them how wonderful I am.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. So, you know, he comes around, wonderful descriptions of the whiskey tumbler, especially when it clinks against his teeth, where he's starting to get a bit worried about this Monkey's Paw story that he's got going on. The whole setup is wonderful. I mean, from a creative point of view, there's a couple of things I really, really like about it. One, it's 100 years old, and yet it's got meta in it. Like you said before, it mentions the Arabian Nights tales, which would have been popular at the time as well. So at the time, it was even more like mentioning Marvel comics in Coronation Street. It's a wonderful piece of meta that is done so subtly as well, because it's just an offhand phrase from the wife that is, you know, it's just thrown away as if it's just jesting at this idea of it being something that you can make wishes on. And locking it into a piece of fiction that already existed. Fantastic. And then taking that idea, that's exactly what it is, saying, here's my core idea, and now I'm going to subvert it. So it's taken this idea of the wishes and getting everything you ever wanted, and I'm now going to turn it into something horrible so that it doesn't actually deliver what you want. So it's from a creative point of view, it's a really, really nice mechanism to use when writing a story.
I mean, I think one of the lovely features in it is the way the monkey's paw actually moves in his hand as well when he makes that wish.
Yes.
Which sort of like gives you an idea of, do you know what? He's made a wish, something's fucking happened. All right. Yeah. That monkey's paw has shifted within his which is
which best win in the world, however hard you are, however much you think you are not scared, and however much bullshit you think this thing is. If you were holding a mummified monkey's paw and you genuinely thought it moved in your hand, you'd just cack it. You'd just drop it, and you'd have a moment of absolute fear.
I would throw it on the floor and stamp on it repeatedly while screaming like a little girl. Yeah, yeah. I've got I've got notes here that say So other potential sources where he could have taken his inspiration from include the Bible and the stories of Faust.
Oh, Faust, yeah, it's the devil, isn't it? The devil's blacksmith.
Yes, I mean, with Faust, we've got him sort of like taking this whole notion that the devil grants him a wish and in return wants his soul. So I suppose there is the unpleasant payoff there. If the idea of losing a soul is an unpleasant payoff to people. I mean, personally, I was 56 last week, I think. And if I've got a soul, I've never once used it to make a mortgage payment or any other sort of payment.
No.
If somebody came and offered me substantial amounts of money for my soul, in that case, it would be a case of cha-ching, hand over the cash. It's not been doing me a lot of good. If it's the thing that's keeping me moral and ethical, it's a demic one. So yeah,
get down to those crossroads, make that deal, come out the best blues guitarist you've ever heard. Yes, it's a story that goes on quite a bit, but that's the deal, though, isn't it? That's the deal side of things. So yes, there can be an influence there. I can't remember what it's called. It's got a specific name, that type of deal. And it's one that I use myself, funnily enough, in my blooding stuff. I love the idea of signing up. You do a deal to get what you want, so you're making a payment. That's the difference. Where the monkey's paw is a natural trade-off. It is, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So I want something nice, you're going to get a reaction of something horrible. Where the kind of, I call it the Faust deal for now, right? But the Faust deal is, you want something nice, you're going to have to give me this. So there's all this, got to ask for things in return, which again goes back to the Wonder Woman, but it doesn't start that way. But it kind of goes that way. But no spoiler. I don't want to spoil it because it has been less than 2 years for that one, so I don't want to spoil that one.
Yeah, as I say, as soon as I've equipped myself with more tissues, I will be
spoiling it for the rest of the internet. No problem at all.
Yeah, I will be having a good hard watch at that one. So yeah, we've got the Bible as well, which I think somebody was grasping here when they were writing these notes, saying that because when the monkey's paw shifts for the first time, it says it moves like a snake in his hand. I've got somebody here suggesting that the snake alludes to the biblical story of Adam and Eve, which I think this is one hell of a stretch, really.
I think every time you mention a snake, people are going to go for the tree of knowledge, aren't they? They're just straight for it,
Snakes and apples, yeah. And people...
Oh, it's never mentioned as an apple. That's the strange thing in the Bible. It just says it's the forbidden fruit. It doesn't actually mention it as an apple at all. That doesn't come until much later on during the Renaissance period of the paintings.
I suppose that's a good thing, because that would mean that the original sin was scrumping. Which would not be.
Basically, it was. Oh, it was basically, I don't know, women not doing what they're told. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if you can say that kind of thing nowadays. To be honest,
I'm not sure that you can. And as a feminist,
you definitely couldn't say that sort of thing in the 70s in my house with my mum. Put it that way.
Speaking as a feminist, I would.
No, but it's true. It's like it's not mentioned as a snake in the Bible either. It's the serpent, which if you do the whole trace back, is just the devil. So it's it's the translation has made it into serpent, which artists then translated as the snake. So it's really interesting.
What is a serpent, though? I mean, I thought serpents were snakes.
Well, I suppose they are. But the serpent, the word serpent relates back to almost like the old word for Satan. So it's kind of like a mistranslation that made it into a serpent.
Right.
I believe. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. Please don't shoot me for it. I just that's what I remember the story being. That it is the translation of it. Doesn't really state it's a snake.
Well, that's the good thing. I mean, I know we're doing this on the internet and anybody can see this if they want to. But if we offend Christians, what are they going to do? Forgive us? I
got in a lot of trouble by saying that to a Christian once. I forgive you, like that. She went mad. It was crazy. It can go a bit strange. But yeah, I mean, yeah, so you can see I don't know. The snake thing. I mean, the snake thing goes all the way back to the Hebrew stories, to be perfectly honest with you. The old throwing the cane on the floor and it turning into a snake was one of the great mage tricks that they used to use to entertain and put fear into the kings. So
Harry Potter did it as well.
He did what?
Harry Potter did it as well.
Harry Potter did it as well. Well, he spoke to snakes, didn't he? He was, he was parcel tongue or something like that, which I thought was DHL, but
speaking to snakes, that sounds like a euphemism for sort of like something completely different and un-Harry Potter related. Yeah.
Yes. Me and Sebastian, we were talking to snakes. You mean that sort of thing?
Yeah. I was just I was having a long, deep conversation with this snake. Yeah.
Who knows? She has many influences.
So what would you wish for? Got a monkey's paw in your hand. What are you going to do?
Oh, God, it's such a tricky one. I can't even decide what I want for Christmas. I don't think I could really work that one out. I mean, there's always the classic case of money doesn't buy you happiness, but I'd like to have the experiment to see if it does. I'd like to experiment with it, have a lot of money, and so that way I can sit down and have my passions. Happiness, I think, is the one thing that anyone should ever wish for. And to me, happy is every one of my friends and family nicely sorted out, so we don't have to worry too much about bills and stuff.
For anybody watching this and wondering which one of us is the nice one and which one of us isn't the nice one, Colin has just given the lovely, nice answer there. And I think my answer would be wish number one. And as a result of it, my genitalia would be so sore that you could probably heat an orphanage with them.
You could do that anyway. But, just don't use lube.
No, I'll tell you what I would wish for. Do you want to hear my first wish? My first wish would be for another season of Firefly. And I would like to see the way I suppose
Firefly is incredible, and I actually think Joss Whedon is a bit of the elephant in this particular room, because we are going to have to discuss him, because creatively he is absolutely fantastic. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, still one of the greatest things ever created. Angel, I still really enjoyed. Firefly was utterly stunning, even though he stole the artwork. And so, it will have to be discussed that way. But he is a bit, he does have this toxic persona of being such an outrageous bully. So it's going to be an interesting one to discuss. Will we be able to?
Yeah, it is actually.
Are we going to be able to pick out the red flags in his writing that actually showed that we should have known all along that he was actually that kind of bully?
Good point. Yeah, we're going to have to discuss him because, as you know, I love Joss Whedon. I love so much of his stuff. I just thought, though, that if I'd wished on the monkey's paw for a new season of Firefly to be made, that they would make it, but there'd be no Nathan Fillion there, and they would put Brendan Fraser in instead. And it would
you think that's a big enough one? It wouldn't be something like, for me, it would be like, if we're doing it, okay, what TV program could you bring back? And it'd be utterly amazing and fantastic. I get hold of the monkey's paw and I say, monkey's paw, I wish for Blake 7 to come back. But the payoff for that would actually be an infinite number of Mrs. Brown's Boys every single night of the week, for example.
Wow. And I don't know which I would watch between Blake 7 and Mrs. Brown's Boys.
I love Blake 7. Blake 7's awesome.
And there we go on the agree to disagree part. In fact, no, in all fairness, I don't think I've actually sat through an episode of it. It just, it was one of those that I always flick past. Mrs. Brown's Boys, I have sat through an episode of that. And it made me want to bleach my eyeballs with broken glass.
But to be fair, and we always have to be fair with these kind of things, a lot of people like it. It gives a lot of people pleasure and entertainment. you know.
And also, it's good to see women in comedy, because there aren't that many that are at the forefront of these things.
It is rejecting the balance very much.
Yeah,
you know. So it's and it's retro. It's bringing back all the 70s humor that we're not allowed to do anymore, which it's now doing as well, which is great. So it does a lot of things. I just discovered 196 other channels that don't have it on, and that's including the one that does something but sell teapots. It's far more interesting.
Yeah. That would be one hell of a comeuppance for anybody wishing with the monkey's paw. I suppose, seriously, one of the things I would possibly wish for would be to have a runaway hit on the bestsellers list.
Yeah.
And again, for those people who are watching this, both of you, Colin has given the lovely answer of he would want happiness for people. He would want his friends to be happy because that would make him happy, which is a wonderful, wonderful approach. And I can't see how the malignant forces that control the monkey's paw would fuck that up for him. But for me, I'm not so altruistic. I'm just a selfish twat. And the whole idea of me being happy is what makes me happy.
I actually think I know how the monkey's paw do it, because however much I'm a kind-hearted, nice chap, there is still, I'm a writer, for Christ's sakes, therefore I have a massive ego, right? So what would actually probably happen to me is I'd sit there and go, I wish everybody would be really nice and happy, and then it will go, my brother, who's actually a really talented musician. But what would really make him happy would be having a runaway hit at the #1 bestsellers on a book list. And therefore, I'd look at that and go, oh, that's not right. I'm the writer in the family. Why is he getting the best? So, there would be definite ways of paying off, because ego does that. You can't, however nice anyone is, and this is including me, there is always a selfish bit in it that says, yeah, I'm really nice, I'm really fantastic, and everyone should know how nice and fantastic I am, as long as I am getting my just desserts for doing that. There is a little bit of that always going on. A lot with you, but a little bit with me.
Yeah, well, you know me. It's me all the time, yeah. It's all I really care about. As I say, really, really love this story. We've got this whole relationship that we've got the mystics is it India where Sergeant Morris has been posted?
It will be, yeah. It's before the split, isn't it? So it's when India and Pakistan were all owned by England, basically. So it was part of the empire.
Yes, so we've got that whole, I suppose there's the class structure of these are people who are lower down the economic scale than we are, sitting around our table drinking and chatting with our mummified paws. We've got the cruelty to animals within there. There's all these wonderful, creepy little background details that make it so much more fun. They just add to all this air of mounting unease and unpleasantness.
And this is where I'll mention the abridged version that Christopher Lee was reading, because the interesting things that they cut out of it were, one, they cut out the meta and didn't mention the Arabian Nights, which is the setup to the actual thing, I think, for the core idea. And they also cut out Mr. White's rant when he has this kind of because they are obviously not living in the posh bit of the village. The son worked in a machine shop, and he does this whole rant about, they forget about us when it's raining, won't come up here when it's, and before the gate goes, and he has this big rant, and they cut all that out of it. So I thought it was quite interesting that they actually cut out the classism, the biggest part of the classism, and the meta out of it in order to abridge it.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Do you think that was because of the audience that it was intended for, or do you think that whoever was looking at that didn't think that the inequities of class structure were particularly frightening?
It doesn't disturb the narrative, I think. So they wanted it to be like a 15-minute read, so they've cut out the stuff that they considered not to be the narrative. But I actually think it takes away some of the character development. I think within what that outburst of Mr. White, I actually think justifies his fear at the end when he makes his final wish. I think there is that moment of wanting to be forgotten. So it's all that foreshadowing and paralleling all the way through, isn't it? So you got the meta of the Arabian Night becomes the three wishes, but it's not the same way as it is in that story. You got the everybody forgets us, nobody comes to see us up here when it's raining, to the please go away, we don't want to see you. So it has that kind of flip on it, which is much sort of like more nuanced within the story itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think we first meet Mr. White and Mr. White and Herbert when they're playing chess. Yeah. And again, it's almost as though we're playing chess with fate. And yeah, I'm trying to get an advantage for my queen over here, and fate's going to make a move and checkmate, and haha, that's you scuppered completely.
He's always being really flippant with it. He's always putting his king in danger, you know, and being, you know, he's being bombastic with his chess playing, and then ends up losing because of it. And so it is all foreshadowing all the way down to what the whole core of the story is, to the golden idea of the story.
Right, contentious opinion, and you know me, I'm forever putting the content contentious opinions. Rather than it being a story of the supernatural, could it just be that Herbert was shit at his job? I mean, we've got the clues that we've got. His name's Herbert, all right, and you refer to somebody as being a Herbert when they're a little bit useless. He dies on the job and gets mutilated, which again, that's not something that people who are the best at their job usually go around doing, is it? It's something that people end up doing when they're a little bit shit. I mean, accidents happen, but yeah, accidents usually happen to Herberts, is what I'm saying here.
I actually think it has a little bit more industrial unionism about it, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, you know, your point is very valid, and yes, you could actually sit there and go, it's a coincidence and he was just rubbish, but he had done the job for many, many years. There was obviously no safety guards on the machine because his capitalist bosses would have taken them off, because it would have slowed the machine down to have those on. And his capitalist bosses didn't want to take any responsibility. Were getting the family to sign a non-disclosure agreement for £200 so that they couldn't be sued for the accident that was going on. So that, you know, there's a little bit of social commentary going on there as well, I think.
More than a little bit of social commentary, yeah. And £200 in exchange for a dead son. I've got to admit, I mean, I know it was. I mean, £200 is still a lot of money, in fairness. But I don't know. It just seems. I would have wanted more.
But it's the coincidence in it. But that's the whole, you know your place. I know my place. They've offered me this. Thank you very much for the offer, sir. You know, that's the very much of 100 years ago, isn't it? That's of its time. Nowadays, it would be, you know, you might have used the monkey's paw, but then you'd go and get a no-win, no-fee monkey's paw to go and fight the case for you.
He should have been onto some sort of lawyer and getting compensation for us or whatever they're called.
So to be perfectly honest with you, a final payment on a house nowadays probably would have been a lot more money than 200 quid as well.
Yes. Right. I must have misread. Have you got a copy of the text close to hand?
Not in front of me, no. But it's the final payment on the house. That's
no, I was just thinking there was a part that really confused me where I could have sworn that Mr. and Mrs. White had been courting 4 years before.
Okay.
And Herbert's 18. And I'm wondering, was there some sort of accident with a contraception and a time machine? Or
well, they're retired, aren't they? The top two, the Mr. and Mrs. White.
Then why has he still got the mortgage on? How can he retire? He must have known that this shit was going. He must have known that this shit was going down. He must have been planning this and thought, I'm going to whittle a monkey's paw out of that Major Morris bloke.
Yeah, he told me about this thing. I thought, oh, God, I could get rid of the sun and I could drive the... It's gaslighting, isn't it? There is no monkey's paw. He's just gaslighting his wife. They didn't even have a son. That was a friend of his that used to come round and pretend to be their son.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, look, this is your 18-year-old son that we've had since we met 4 fucking years ago. Yeah. She's a little bit, she's been on too much, she's been drinking the methylated spirits again and is there thinking, they're probably right. Either that or she's thinking, look, if it's another evening's entertainment of some soldier coming round talking about his mummified monkey's paw, in that case, fuck it, I don't mind being gaslit.
So look at it. It'll be about the money, won't it? Was that about the spot?
It was, I think he was squeezing a hand. I'm going to see if I can find my copy of it on this machine. Where have you gone?
That's when they get told, isn't it? Let's have a look here. Morris said things happen so naturally. Yada, yada, yada. I was asked to call. Oh, here we go. Right. It broke off as the tragic meaning of the part about him not being in pain came to her. I thought that was beautifully written, that bit. There were bits of it I found a little confusing, the way he kept referring to the other, said the other, and I lost a bit of track of which other he was talking about at times. But I thought that was really nice when he says he is hurt, badly hurt, he said quietly, but he's not in any pain. Oh, thank God, said the old woman, pressing her hands together tightly. Thank God for that. She broke off as the tragic meaning of the part about him not being in pain came to her. I thought that was really
that was nice and that was classic. And I'd misread that part. It was 40 years rather than 4 years.
Well, there you go. Yeah, easily done.
So there wasn't some dodgy time traveling thing. One of the first things she says is, sounds like the Arabian Nights, said Mrs. White, as she rose and began to set the dinner. Don't you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me? Yeah,
you see, that's a bit of its time, isn't it?
What the chuff would have happened if he'd gone, yep, all right, monkey's paw in the hand, give her 4 pairs of hands.
Well, she would have turned into, basically, a large 4-handed woman, and she'd be able to beat him up for a change.
Yeah, that would have worked. But I suppose, would that have made her a spider?
No, because it would have been 6 limbs, wouldn't it? Spiders have 8.
She'd still have 2 legs as well.
She'd be an insect. Yeah, 4 arms and 2 legs. That's 6 limbs.
4 pairs of arms.
Okay, now you get that goes to 10 then, doesn't it? That would make her. What's got 10? A crab.
Mrs. White's got crabs, right? Yeah.
I just think it was the wrong way around. I would have thought that she would have picked it up and wished for him to have 4 pairs of arms. You know.
I don't know. That was at a time when blokes could actually be useless and just sit around the house doing nothing.
Yes.
He says to his friend who's sitting around the house doing nothing whilst he's sitting.
It is at night. Come on, we have been sat around the house doing nothing most of the day, so it's time to rest.
I've got to admit it can be wearisome. As I say, one of my favourite stories, and although it sounds like I'm taking the mickey out of it, I'm not. It's genuinely creepy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Read this one on your own late at night, and you are going to have a very uncomfortable night.
And it's a really good thing from a writing point of view. It's actually a really good starting point. It's public domain, which means that the idea is something you can just pick up on. And there's so much to pick up on this that you can use in your own writing, things like the nothing at the door. It's a great example of how nothing works. So like you were saying before, create the empty space to be frightened of rather than, fill it with a monster. But also just the little subtleties, how to write mood in it, how you can be so efficient with your words to be able to get incredibly complex emotions across. I think it's just wonderful for all those point of views. What do you think the golden idea is? What do you think is the absolute why it is? And genuinely, one of the few stories you can genuinely say is timeless. It's a genuinely timeless story.
I'd say it boils down to, in Stephen King's Dan's Macabre, he talks about how you have to show the monster, that the monster needs to be seen, and that's the part where your audience is both very, very shocked and heaves a huge sigh of relief. Because if you're watching something like one of the creature feature B movies from the 1940s or 50s, you would suddenly be exposed and look, there's a 100-foot giant ant going over the countryside. And you go, it's a 100-foot giant ant. And then you think, oh, but at least it's not a 200-foot giant ant, because that would have been awful. And this manages to do the whole thing without showing you the monster. And it's the monster that you've created in your imagination that's all the more terrifying, because you've not been able to articulate it. And I think it's going back to what is fear, and fear is fear of the unknown. That's what scares all of us. Yeah. And it's the unknown, that it could have been anything lurking there. It could have been a dead, loved, lost one, which would be bad enough, but a mutilated, dead, lost, loved one is just unbearable to think about.
It's or coming back soulless, or coming back, there's a wonderful bit in it when it says it's been 10 days. That's he was bad enough when I looked at him that I wouldn't let you see him, but it's been 10 days. So he has all that going on in his head as well.
Yeah, and I mean, his name was Herbert to start off with, so he won't have been pretty. I've never met a pretty Herbert in my entire life. And I've met a few.
It's interesting that you mentioned Stephen King as well, actually, because Stephen King uses part of it in Pet Sematary, I think. Part of the general core of the idea of things coming back and not being the same when they come back. And that's what's frightening about them.
Yeah, that's, I was just thinking of a lovely meme I'd seen the other day about Pet Sematary, which, the little lad was called Gage.
Yes.
It showed him running towards the truck, and it said "Gage against the machine," which
nice.
Which I thought was incredibly poetic.
It would have been fantastic in this story if Herbert was called Gage for the same reason, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Or Florence. If they'd had a daughter called Florence, that would have also worked.
We've got the limitation on it as well. I suppose, do you think this is a storytelling technique, that you're only allowed 3 wishes, and that he'd said that the fakir had limited it to 3 people using it?
Yeah, there's a power of 3, isn't there, which has always been around. It's a very, when writing speeches, or if you're doing comedy, they always say that you should do things in 3s, and it's always the 3rd one that has the power. So, that way. So I think that is it's a trope, isn't it?
When we're telling jokes, it's always 3 men walk into a bar, an Englishman, an Irishman, a Scotsman.
Yes.
Or Tony Blair's speeches of education, education, education. The repetition of 3 does have that power.
It's also within bullet points. If you're trying to make a point, it's not just the repetition. You'll go, we're all about the NHS, we're all about the poor, and we're all about education, and you keep it into 3 headlines and 3 subject matters, and you keep it in 3s, because there's something about the power of 3 that just seems to naturally work when dealing with communications.
Yeah, I think if it goes to more than that, in that case, people lose interest.
Yeah.
And if it's less than that, it sounds as though, is that all there is? Yeah. I mean, if Blair had said education, education, you just think, has he got a stutter? What the chuff is wrong with the man? Yeah.
Yeah. You've gone education, 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 education. I'm getting bored saying it at that point. Yeah. It's too many.
Yeah.
Monty Python did it, didn't they? With the holy hand grenade of Antioch. You shall count to 3 and no more. 4 is too many. 5 is way out. 3 is the number.
Yeah, they did some good stuff.
So, yeah, I think it's just such a well balanced story, and such great pacing to it. It doesn't feel rushed. The scares don't feel cheap. You can almost see where it's going, but at the same time, you kind of don't really see, nowadays, because we've seen the story so many times. I mean, can you imagine reading that for the first time 100 years ago? And you get that ending, the way that it pans out, and especially as he's in the bedroom upstairs when his wife is trying to get to the top lock, which I must admit is quite a funny thought. And she's trying to jump up to this top lock and this banging on the door, and there's no sound from the other side. It's not like he's going, "Mum, let me in." It's just this banging with no one speaking on the other side. And she's scraping the chair, and you hear all that noise going on, and he's in the bedroom absolutely shitting it and making that wish, and he doesn't even tell you what the wish is. And I thought that was very nice as well. You don't know what he actually wishes for. You just know the outcome of it.
Yeah, it is. It's got so many strong things going for it, and as you say, the pacing is absolutely wonderful. The imagery, it's all just sort of like subtle background imagery that works and it accumulates. And yeah, the fact that we don't know what his actual wish is, we just see the effects of it. I mean, even that leaves you, the more you think about it, the more you're thinking, were there going to be any ramifications from his wish? Yeah.
What are the ramifications? Not are there going to be. What are the ramifications of his wish?
Yeah, it's
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant one. For anybody who's not read it, even though we've just spoiled the shit out of it, I would still suggest you get into it because it's just so worth it. It's worth it to see how the characters are built, how the mood and the framing of it all occurs.
From a writing point of view, from a writing and creative point of view, if you want to write a short story, or if you're writing a ghost story, or you're writing anything like that, it is one of the ones you have to read to get a feel for how you do that kind of thing. You know, there's so many things around that you sit there and do it. You know, there are certain books that they tell you should read because it's like the best example. The Monkey's Paw is in the technique that is used. Not always within the writing style. Like I say, I got a bit confused with some of the dialogue at times, but the pacing of it and the way that the mysticism is set up and the way it is so efficient and the way it has room to breathe. I always remember Roger Waters when they wrote the Dark Side of the Moon. There's a track on it called Us and Them, and it has these moments of complete silence where your brain is going, "Oh, they're still singing," and they stop, and you get this music, and then they come singing again. And I saw an interview with Roger going, that's what he learned in that track, is the time when to create a moment of thought, and it doesn't have to be filled with words. And I think Monkey's Paw does that. It has these moments in it, even down to the wonderful bit when the Sergeant Major's there going, the first guy had his 3 wishes and his last one was for death. You don't know what happened to him. You don't know the other 2 wishes. There's so much you don't know, and it creates this bigger world outside of what you're reading that is just great, that has no explanation, no description. It's great. It's absolutely fantastic. Loved it.
Yeah, and so efficient in the storytelling. I mean, you've got 5 characters in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, the smallest character
at the end of it.
Yeah, I suppose the smallest character is the bloke who's paying over the money. He's just sort of like there to sort of like give out bad news and sort of like say, but here's 200 quid. You've got the backstory coming from the Sergeant Major. You've got Herbert, who's your victim, and you've got the conflict that's going on between the husband and wife, one of whom wants the obvious thing. She wants her son back because her son's been taken away, and he wants the same thing, but also doesn't want sort of like a mutilated, soulless zombie son.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then you have 2 other characters that you're missing there, which are so important to the whole thing. And that is the Fuka, who created the Monkey's Paw in the first place, and the first guy with his wishes that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, yes, you are absolutely right.
And it's easy to forget that they're there, but they are so intrinsic to the plot because it makes Mr. White the last man with the wishes. It makes his wish at the end the last wish that Monkey's Paw can do. Nobody else can pick that up and do anything now. It is an absolute end to everything that has come before it.
Which is so rare with a horror story, to have an absolute end like that. Which I suppose it's rare if that was an absolute end to it. If what his wish has been is, I hope he's gone to the wrong house, or something like that. In that case, yeah. Herbert knocking on somebody's house next door. Yeah, you get what I mean? Because with horror stories, usually there's that whole suggestion of, well, that's the end of the story, but it could come back. You know, Jason might return. Freddy could come back to somebody else's nightmare. You never know.
The Monkey's Paw 2, The Other Hand.
Yeah. Yes, we need it. Yeah. The monkey's other paw.
Yeah, the second hand.
Second-hand monkey's paws, yeah.
Second-hand wish. There you go. The Monkey's Paw 2, The Second-hand Wish. That's a great title. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely need to do something with that. Yeah.
I think we're going to have a race now. There's going to be a race between me and Ash into who writes The Monkey's Paw 2, The Second-hand Wish first. I know who's going to win, and I'm pointing at him. I know you can't see where I'm pointing on the screen, but
it will be the person who's doing the story about a new season of Firefly coming out. Yeah. Or a new season of Firefly where they've got to rescue a naked Eliza Dushku from. I don't know where this story's going, but I've got the scene visualised. Yeah,
I've got an idea where the story's going, to be perfectly honest with you, and I think it's about time you went to finish off Wonder Woman. And I use the word finish off in a very loose way.
It's about time I did. Yes, very loose. Any more thoughts on the monkey's paw?
I don't know. It's that whole, like you say, you do the what would you wish for conversation. There is where it's been used. It's a wonderful piece of creativity, I think. And like I say, it's a golden idea. I'm going to ask you the question here. If you were looking at that, where would you go in and say, that's where I think I would have had the idea and how I would have taken that idea through?
I think there's a chance. One of the things that I love doing is fannying around in antique shops. I love going into those and seeing things from the past. And there's something enchanting about things from the past. There's something wonderful about the history of things. Who have I got? Can we see her?
Yes.
She's African, and she's one of a set of 3 African pieces of objet d'art that I've got. And because they've come from a different culture, they've almost got a mystical appeal to me, which I really, really like. And it's that sensation, it's that suggestion that it's come from somewhere else that might have something a little bit more mystic or mystical than the world in which I live, that gives them that appeal to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I would have taken my inspiration from something as creepy as a mummified monkey's paw, which you got. I mean, I think rabbit's foots are pretty fucking creepy. Anybody who's going around with, I've got a lucky rabbit's foot, it was not lucky. There's a 3-legged rabbit wandering around, well, hopping around, and not hopping like a rabbit, but hopping.
Get it the right way. There's actually 4 Victorians walking around with new key rings and a fresh pie at Mrs. May's pie shop that has ears.
Which, it's like keeping parts of animals just because we think they've got special powers is fucking weird.
But the whole notion, it is inspirational. It is like you say, it's looking back in time. Yes, we wouldn't do it now, but they obviously had these thoughts, and so that in itself can be inspirational. And that goes right the way back. I mean, you were holding up that piece of African art before. Now, there was a period of time when some of the African art coming into Europe for the first time used to be known as primitive art or savage art at one point. And that was there was a book of that done, which was a major influence on Picasso. So Picasso's Cubism actually was inspired by the artwork that came from the African villages and came up that was known as primitive art. So there is massive influences that kind of go all the way through the different cultures like that, which I think are fantastic.
When you're saying inspired by, do you mean he copied them?
To start with, yes. He went to Paris and saw an exhibition of it. So he came back and started to try and copy it. And you see in the early parts of when he was starting to develop Cubism, that it does start off as a very kind of just not very detailed image that, you know, with very sort of like broad strokes details to it, which were very similar to the icons that were being brought out of Africa at the time. And then that started becoming more geometric in its shapes, and then became Cubism. So there's an evolution of it that stems back to the African artwork.
Just laziness on his part, then, isn't it? That's just sort of like, yeah, all right, I'm copying, and now I can't even be bothered. I'll just sort of like, yeah, do blocky, pixelated stuff.
When you see it, it looks like that. Actually, when you see the evolution, it starts looking like he just couldn't be bothered. Just started going. But yeah, so it's fascinating how things like that can come through, and how, remember, 100 years ago, the majority of people hadn't been abroad, and again, especially of that class. So that, you know, you got someone who was in the army. The best chance you had of getting abroad most of the time was to join the army and be part of the whole colonialist thing. So when you saw stuff you didn't understand, you saw, you know, we're a God-fearing Christian country that's looking at heathens worshipping different ways and talking about fate, and, you know, not talking about Christ, and, you know, the whole missionary side of things. You can see where you can really see how those inspirations informed the way that this was made, the way that this was written.
Absolutely. What are you thinking of for our next read?
Now, you see, I think I'm going to be a bit challenging. I'm going to go for The Demon Lover by Shirley Jackson.
Right.
Okay. It's not a horror story, though it is.
I've not read this one.
Yeah. And it's a bit challenging. So I love Shirley Jackson. I think she is incredible. And there's something about this one that I think it was, I read it, and then I read a load of reviews on it. And I kept reading reviews, mainly from men who didn't understand it, and just declared it to be dull and boring. And then loads of reviews from women going, no, it's absolutely fantastic and really haunting and all that kind of stuff. And when you read it, you'll understand what I mean. It's a really good example of it just being, you know, it's almost like, trying to think of the best example of it. Hey, read it. We'll talk about that next week. But have a read of it. The Demon Lover by Shirley Jackson.
Lover, Shirley Jackson. Right, yes, that's my reading challenge for this week. Yes. And yeah, I like the fact that you say it's challenging.
Yes. Yeah, it's challenging from a number of different points of view. You know, one of which is I don't know, it's very difficult to predict how anyone can react to some things sometimes. You know, I take Zack Snyder's Justice League as a classic example of that. And you know, previous to it, in that some people love it, some people hate it, but I don't consider it necessarily Marmite. I think it's just a style that some people just can't get their heads into at a time. So, be interesting. I'm really, really interested to see your opinion on it when it comes around next week.
Can't wait.
Okay,
Can't wait. So, we've said before, please, I know, and yeah, Stephen's going to bullock. Well, he's going to bullock you. He's not going to bullock me. But yeah, if you haven't already done it, please smash the like button, or if not smash it, at least click like.
Bell,
button candle. Yeah.
Bell booking. It's one of those things. Yeah. Or Bell Lee and Summerby, but that's a particular football joke that will go straight over Ash's head.
That's not a particular football joke that goes. Every football joke goes over my head. Yeah.
But yeah, do it buttons, share, tell everybody that we're just doing this, because otherwise we'll just continue anyway.
Yeah. That'll
fun.
Fucking show you.
Yeah. Great fun. I'm loving it. So it's great. And keep up, comments and suggestions. If you have any suggestions for something that you want us to discuss, then please put it in the comments. Like, dislike, complain to the press about us. We're quite happy with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
The only thing we can't do is the naked podcasts, which It's too cold in this room.
Yeah, well, you know,
Yeah.
I got vetoed.
Lucky you.
So anyway, so that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Ash. Smash the buttons and all that kind of stuff. See you later, dude.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.